Look, we all love a good vacation. Maybe you picture yourself on a pristine beach, margarita in hand, or perhaps you're more of a trekking through ancient ruins kind of person. But what if I told you that for Americans, some destinations are about as accessible as a sensible Republican tax plan? That's right, folks. In 2025, there are some countries that have slapped a big fat "Do Not Enter" sign on their borders, specifically for U.S. citizens. We're talking full-blown bans, stemming from everything from nuclear standoffs to collapsing regimes. So buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the top 10 countries that are legally off-limits to Americans, why you're banned, and what it means for the future of travel. And let me tell you, number 7, it's a war zone even locals are desperate to escape. Let's kick things off with a classic, shall we? North Korea, a nation that practically invented the phrase isolationist state. Ruled by a dynasty that makes the Kardashians look camera-shy, North Korea has long viewed the United States with the same fondness one reserves for a particularly persistent case of athlete's foot. But in 2025, those frosty relations plunged into the Arctic abyss. Citing unfounded and, frankly, hilarious fears of American espionage, Kim Jong-un slammed the door shut on American tourists. And when I say slammed, I mean it. We're talking zero-zip, zilch visas issued since 2024. Want to see the majestic beauty of Mount Pektu? Too bad, America. Go climb a skyscraper instead. Curious about the architectural marvels of Pyongyang? Guess you'll have to settle for a rerun of The Interview, which, let's be honest, is probably banned there too. The official line, protecting national security. Ah, Russia, land of vodka, Tolstoy, and increasingly, international sanctions that would make a capitalist blush. Remember that whole meddling in elections thing? Yeah, it turns out the international community doesn't exactly hand out gold stars for that sort of behavior, and what better way to retaliate against those pesky sanctions than by banning American tourists? That's right, folks. In a move that surprised absolutely no one, Russia decided to weaponize tourism, effectively barring over 300,000 potential American visitors and costing their own economy a cool $50 million in lost revenue. Want to stroll through Red Square? Not yet. Dreaming of experiencing the grandeur of the Hermitage Museum? Not on Putin's watch. Of course, Russia claims it's all about reciprocity. Apparently some American visa policies have ruffled their feathers, but let's be real, this is about as subtle as a bear wearing a tutu. Remember that whole Iran nuclear deal thing? The one that was supposed to prevent, a nuclear arms race in the Middle East? Yeah, well, buckle up, because that went about as well as a vegan barbecue. With the deal collapsing faster than a poorly constructed Jenga tower, tensions between the US and Iran skyrocketed. And as the diplomatic channels dried up, so too did the once promising stream of American tourists. We're talking about a country that welcomed nearly 1 million American visitors back in 2019. Now, zero. Zilch. Nada. Want to marvel at the ancient ruins of Persepolis? Too bad, America. Looks like you're fresh out of time-traveling options. Chapter 4: Cuba, from thaw to deep freeze. Remember that brief shining moment when relations between the US and Cuba were actually, dare I say it, thawing? When American tourists flocked to the island eager to experience its vibrant culture and vintage car charm? Yeah, well, put on a sweater, folks, because the diplomatic deep freeze is back in full effect. Citing everything from sonic attacks, still not sure what those are but they sound unpleasant, to the ever-reliable human rights concerns, the U.S. slammed the brakes on the Cuban thaw harder than a mojito-fueled conga line hitting a brick wall. The result? A 20% drop in tourism, with locals who once welcomed American dollars now struggling to make ends meet. Want to sip daiquiris on the Malecon? Tough luck. Chapter 5: Venezuela, Hyperinflation, and a Travel Warning. Ah, Venezuela, a country with more oil than a Kardashian's makeup kit, yet somehow still struggling to keep the lights on. Years of economic mismanagement and corruption have plunged the nation into a state of hyperinflation so extreme that you practically need a wheelbarrow full of cash to buy a loaf of bread. And if the economic woes weren't enough to deter potential tourists, the U.S. State Department has slapped a big fat "do not travel" warning on Venezuela, citing everything from rampant crime to political instability. Want to marvel at the beauty of Angel Falls? Better pack a bulletproof vest. Dreaming of exploring the Amazon rainforest? Hope you've got a black belt in self-defense and a PhD in negotiating with guerrilla groups. Chapter 6: Libya, lost in the desert of conflict. Remember Muammar Gaddafi, the dictator with the flamboyant outfits and a penchant for Amazonian bodyguards? Yeah, well, after he was deposed back in 2011, Libya decided to embrace democracy with all the grace of a toddler trying to eat spaghetti with a spoon. The result? A full-blown civil war, with rival factions vying for control of the country like contestants in a particularly violent game of Risk. And as if that wasn't chaotic enough, let's throw in a healthy dose of terrorism for good measure. The U.S. State Department, in a move that surprised absolutely no one, issued a travel ban so strict that even Chuck Norris would think twice about visiting. Want to explore the ancient ruins of Leptis Magna? Better pack a flak jacket and a year's supply of canned goods. Yemen, a country that was already struggling with poverty and instability, decided to up the ante by plunging headfirst into what can only be described as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. We're talking about a country where over 24 million people, that's more than the entire population of Australia, are in desperate need of humanitarian aid. The culprit? A brutal civil war, fueled by regional powers and fueled by a level of indifference that would make a sociopath blush. Saudi Arabia, with the full-throated support of the US, has been bombing Yemen back to the Stone Age, all in the name of fighting Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. The result? A famine so severe that children are literally starving to death, a healthcare system that's on life support, and a level of human suffering that's difficult to comprehend. Chapter 8, Afghanistan. Back to the future minus the fun. Remember that whole war on terror thing? The one that started way back in 2001 and seems to be lasting longer than your Aunt Mildred's fruitcake? Yeah, well, Afghanistan was kind of the poster child for that whole debacle. And after 20 years, trillions of dollars, and countless lives lost, the US decided to pack up its toys and go home, leaving the country right back where it started, under the control of the Taliban. The Taliban, in a move that surprised absolutely no one, promptly rolled back 2 decades of progress, banning girls from school, cracking down on dissent, and generally making life miserable for anyone who enjoys basic human rights. The US, having learned absolutely nothing from its previous misadventures, has issued a travel ban so strict that even Bear Grylls would struggle to survive. Chapter 9, Syria, where even breathing is a political act. Syria, a country that was once known for its ancient history and vibrant culture, has spent the better part of the last decade trapped in a civil war so brutal, so bloody, that it makes Game of Thrones look like a tea party. Bashar al-Assad, a man who makes your average dictator look like a kindergarten teacher, has clung to power with the tenacity of a particularly stubborn barnacle, unleashing chemical weapons on his own people, bombing hospitals, and generally making life a living hell for anyone unfortunate enough to be caught in the crossfire. The US, having grown weary of playing world police, at least for now, has issued a travel ban so strict that even the most intrepid war correspondent would think twice about venturing into this particular inferno. Chapter 10. Myanmar, from tourist paradise to military junta nightmare. Myanmar, a country that was once poised to become Southeast Asia's next tourism darling, took a sharp turn into dystopian nightmare territory when the military decided to stage a coup, overthrowing the democratically elected government and plunging the country into chaos. Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate who was once hailed as a beacon of democracy, was placed under house arrest, and the military junta unleashed a brutal crackdown on dissent, killing hundreds of protesters and arresting thousands more. The US, not wanting to be seen endorsing a bunch of power-hungry generals, has issued a travel ban so strict that even your most adventurous Instagram influencer friend wouldn't dare post a selfie from there. The future of travel, closed borders, open minds. So there you have it, folks, 10 countries that are officially off-limits to Americans in 2025. From nuclear standoffs to collapsing regimes, these travel bans paint a stark picture of a world increasingly divided, a world where borders are closing faster than a tourist trap on a rainy day. These bans cost billions, divide families, and erase cultural bridges. But where one door closes, another opens. For every country on this list, there are dozens more eager to welcome American tourists with open arms and open wallets. Look, we all love a good vacation. Maybe you picture yourself on a pristine beach, margarita in hand, or perhaps you're more of a trekking through ancient ruins kind of person. But what if I told you that for Americans, some destinations are about as accessible as a sensible Republican tax plan? That's right, folks. In 2025, there are some countries that have slapped a big fat "Do Not Enter" sign on their borders, specifically for US citizens. We're talking full-blown bans, stemming from everything from nuclear standoffs to collapsing regimes. So buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the top 10 countries that are legally off-limits to Americans, why you're banned, and what it means for the future of travel. And let me tell you, number 7, It's a war zone even locals are desperate to escape.